Hello and welcome to another tier list. This time we are doing the handhelds, Nintendo handhelds. Last week we did the consoles, where I had mentioned I'd be doing the handhelds. Now I'm not doing every variation of each handheld because I felt that would be a little redundant. So like no Game Boy. I almost didn't even add the Game Boy Color to be honest. Anyways, let's get into this. Starting off with the first handheld, the Game Boy. Prior to this, we had some pretty generic, like one screen, two button, um, essentially like little games. I think I had a couple of them as a kid. So the Game Boy, uh, it it opened a floodgate. It started handhelds. It wasn't great. It was a product of its time. Um, had a little rival, the Game Gear. If the Game Gear had have had a better battery life, which again that was a product of its time as well, it would have probably stomped the Game Boy because the Game Gear was in color, where the Game Boy was just 8-bit green screen. Anyways, the birth of handhelds, it had its small problems, batteries and whatnot. It was also huge and pretty heavy. Hence, the Pocket was a nice refresher, although the Pocket's battery life was trash. Either way, I'm going to put this in the A tier. Personally, for me, what stops from going to S is the bulkiness and the fact that it actually didn't really feel that great in your hands. But I mean, it was what we had. Onwards to Game Boy Color. Not a big upgrade. I believe there was a bit of a technological upgrade to it, aside from the color. Anyways, it had a handful of exclusive games, like Pokemon Crystal was one. I think Wario Land 3 was one. Anyways, it's a smaller, sleeker feel. It definitely feels nicer in your hands. It doesn't have the weight. Requires two less batteries, but yet keeps almost the same battery life. It is easily a drastic improvement over the Game Boy, 1 to 1. However, I don't think it's still. Maybe it does hit that S rank. It was backwards compatible, so it could play all your games. Even some of them had a slight color filter. But yeah, I think the Game Boy Color is the definitive version of the Game Boy, so I think it's fair to give it an S rating. Onward to the Game Boy Advance. Um, Most of my Game Boy Advance play has been years after the release. I played a few games when I was in high school over emulator. However, I didn't own a Game Boy Advance until probably a year before the DS came out, where I bought an SP, the superior version. But again, it doesn't add enough other than a internal battery to really warrant a place on this list. I feel it's more or less the same, just with an internal battery. Which, if that's an issue, just get an adapter. And I mean, I think I played my Game Boy Advance SP plugged into the wall most of the time, anyways. Unless I was like out and about somewhere. Anyways, I had a pretty good library of games. It was a huge jump from the color digital screen of the Game Boy Color to the 16-bit, pretty much Super Nintendo in your hand. With the technology allowed them to clean up things even a little more. So a lot of these games even look nicer than Super Nintendo games. I think I'm gonna put it in B. However, because it didn't have the popularity that the Game Boy had. It was, I think, it's we started delving into a more mature era, more mature games, and I think the handheld environment at the time just wasn't there. So, anyways, we're gonna go into the DS. Upon release, the initial DS was not the most sought after. However, it really grew into itself. It has a phenomenal catalog of games, most of which we will never see the light of day again because of the gimmick use of the dual screen. Where you had to like for example, Pokemon Rangers, where you had to circle a ball. I know there's a slew of Castlevania games that require you doing things on the bottom screen for combat and stuff. Anyways, I'm kind of teetering this between B and A. I think we're gonna have to put it up into A. We'll put her in A. The 3DS, easily the best handheld Nintendo's ever released. Uh, its competition, the Vita. That's another thing. The DS, it smoked the PSP. Sony. There's a reason why Sony's probably never gonna do handhelds again. They released two and they bombed. And they're both fantastic. So I mean, it's sometimes it doesn't matter how good your hardware is. Apparently. Anyways, the 3DS. The 3D gimmick aside, because it's literal trash. I don't know a single person that chose to use it. I feel like most games didn't even really utilize it by the end. They released the 2DS as a giant cash grab where, oh, here's the console, $100 cheaper. You don't have a 3D feature. By that point, I'd already bought a 3DS Lite. I'd bought a new 3DS XL, which I also thought about putting the new 3DS on here due to the addition of the button for games like Monster Hunter and Smash Bros. However, that attachment is also separate. So I felt like it wasn't enough of a hardware change to really warrant it on this list. Either way, phenomenal game library, a great little piece of hardware. I have lots of fond memories of playing games on the 3DS, as do probably anyone watching this. I think it would be a crime to not put the 3DS under S. Now over to the Switch Lite. It succeeds in being a more comfortable handheld than its daddy, the Switch. However, it's only a handheld, so if it had failed in that aspect, then it would have essentially failed in everything. It has obviously the same fantastic library of games that the Switch has. I loved my Switch Lite. Loved as in past tense, up until the day that it got Drift. Drift is what is going to be keeping this from S tier. The Joy-Cons coming out with Drift was pretty much unexcusable. To release a handheld that suffers from the same thing, just idiotic. Sure, you can buy like a $20 kit, replace your joystick. However, you risk potentially damaging the console, and it's just not good. My 3D, my Switch Lite lasted me about 2 years. And I probably put about half the amount of playtime into it as I put into my 3DS. So we're gonna put it, like I kind of want to put it A, but I think the Drift, without Drift, it would probably even be S tier. But I think the Drift alone brings it down to B. Again, I loved the feel of the Switch Lite in your hand. It was great. Having things locked at 720 wasn't an issue for me because it was a handheld. But and the battery life was really good too. But the Drift is just, it's too much of a downside. Having to potentially send in your console to be fixed, or to just not be able to get it fixed, and then either have to buy a new one or go without. It sucks. It's not a good feeling, and it's never happened to me with any of the, I had a Game Boy, I had a Game Boy Color. I'm pretty sure if I still had the Game Boys, I bet you they would still work. I might still have one kicking around. My Game Boy Advance, I guess it's not original Advance, although my roommate has an original Advance that works fine. My SP, I literally was playing it like 3 months ago. Looks great, works great. Again, it's just, it's the only Nintendo handheld I've ever had to replace. Some of them I replaced because I wanted newer versions of them, but it is the only one I had to replace, and that's a sour spot for me. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. It might be a bit before I do our tier list because I draw a blank on topics. Anyway, if you do like it, feel free to drop a like, subscribe, comment below, and there'll be a link to our Twitch in the description if you're interested in stopping by and seeing some of our live play. We started Symphony Night last night, and hopefully we can run that without any error issues. We're also playing Tales of Symphonia. you want to stop by and check some of that out. Anyways, take care and have a great day.